Here at Singapore's National Cancer Centre, there's a resident physician called Dr. William Tan, who knows firsthand what it's like to battle cancer and survive. William has been a fighter all his life. At the age of 2, he contracted polio and was left paralysed from the waist down. But determined never to let being in a wheelchair hold him back, William went on to achieve goal after goal. One of his earliest ambitions was to become a medical doctor, and he did his PhD in Pediatrics at the University of Auckland's medical school. Dr. William Tan, it's a real honour to meet you, and thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you, it's my privilege.
You've been an amazing achiever your whole life. You are the first person in the world to have completed marathons in a wheelchair in not only Antarctica but also the North Pole. You are part of the Singapore Paralympic team. You are a survivor of stage 4 leukemia. And of course you're a medical doctor and a neuroscientist. How have you managed to squeeze so much into your life?
Well, very challenging, but it's driven by the fact that I want to live life without limits, even being on a wheelchair. But I'm very grateful to many people along the way, and I'm very grateful to New Zealand especially, because it was the first country that I went to when I left Singapore, and New Zealand has played a very huge part in my life journey.
You went to New Zealand in 1989 to Auckland University's medical school, and before that you were also at Massey in Palmerston North. Why did you go to New Zealand to study?
Way back in 1981, I was looking for a place to do my postgraduate studies, and I discovered a veterinary school in Palmerston North, and that really attracts me because the kind of courses that they offered was in line with my interest in life sciences. So I spent 2 years doing my Masters of Science in Physiology, and I came back to Singapore and continued my work in the civil service, and also pursue my dreams to compete for Singapore in the Paralympics. But after the Paralympics, I have this huge desire to go back to New Zealand, and this time around was Auckland Medical School to do my PhD. And the time in Palmerston North certainly influenced me a lot because it really broadened my horizon in many areas, academically and also in the area of sports. And of course, New Zealand is such a beautiful country. I've never seen a country so beautiful as New Zealand. And I think the 5 years in Auckland certainly played a very, very big part in my life journey.
So was there anything in particular in terms of New Zealand's approach to education that stood out for you that was different to what you'd experienced before?
What really appeals to me in terms of the education I had in New Zealand was I was able to pursue many areas of interest, not just my area of specialty, but I had very broad education in the area of life sciences. I was taking subjects in other fields as well. And that kind of structure helps me a lot because coming from a background like Singapore, sometimes I think the system is such that in those early years we were so rigid in terms of the kind of subject that we can undertake to fulfill our course requirement. So I was very excited I could take courses here, take courses there, and I think that is a very holistic approach for me. And it appeals to me. So even in my PhD, I was able to undertake subjects in my core area, which is pediatric neuroscience, but also in all the other related subjects, which form a very strong foundation that subsequently in my research, it actually contributed to some real breakthrough research when I was at the Auckland Medical School.
You mentioned that you got into sports in New Zealand and you did some amazing things in that respect. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did?
Well, I would say that it's very accidental. It was a conversation with my professor who was doing diabetes research in children. And I thought, how can I, as a sportsman, do something? And I think that my imagination started to go, wow. I was thinking, a marathon? Well, maybe not marathon. It's not challenging enough. since New Zealand is so beautiful and there's so much space, why don't I do something really big? And I started to think big. Wellington to Auckland in a wheelchair. And then subsequently, years later, Bluff to Cape Reinga. And I think that the environment was so conducive in terms of the way people was able to accept others with wild ideas, big ideas. And there were people who were willing to be part of the team and say, William, let's help you to organize it and make that idea happen. This really speaks for itself how my life has been so enriched. It's not just academically, but also in the area of sports, but also it really helped me to see what the world can offer. New Zealand, a place with so much beauty, and also the hospitality of the people. The New Zealanders really touched my heart.
Did you ever face any particular challenges being in a wheelchair in New Zealand?
Never. Very interesting that you asked this question because I had so much frustration growing up in Singapore in those early years where there were a lot of places that I just cannot enter because there were so much steps. Even on the road, I couldn't use the pavement, the pedestrian walkway because there are no ramps. And when I went to New Zealand, I felt I'm so pampered, and this is a place that recognizes equal opportunities, access as well. And I learned so much that when I left New Zealand, I had this compelling desire that I want to come back and do something in Singapore, be an advocate for people with disability.
It was in 2009, 6 years ago, that you were diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia. This must have come as a terrible shock. How did you manage to battle this illness?
Certainly a very big shock because I was relocating from St. George Hospital in Sydney back to Singapore. I was offered a position here as a resident physician at the National Cancer Centre. And I was racing in the Paris Marathon and I started to bleed. And I was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia, devastating, so hard to accept. I always think that I'm too big to fail. I'm a physician. How can I fall sick? I'm a Paralympian. I'm very fit. But I realized I'm just as mortal, fragile like anybody else. I work closely with my oncologists. We had 6 months of chemotherapy and then a bone marrow transplant. My second sister was a stem cell donor. And this is my 6th year into remission. And of course, I have great friends in New Zealand who were very supportive when I was battling my leukemia. There were all those messages and all those phone calls encouraging me. My friends from the Rotary Club of Remuera in Auckland. I've had some lifelong friends since the days of studying in New Zealand.
What advice would you have to anybody who is considering studying in New Zealand?
Well, great choice. I really owe it a lot to New Zealand, and certainly I would strongly recommend New Zealand as the best choice.
Dr. Tan, thank you so much for talking to us. It's really been wonderful to hear from you.
Thank you very much.